So like the semiconductor strategy, which we were looking to do 25 years back, if we'd done it, we'd be having some of the most valuable companies in the world in Australia. For example, Nvidia. Now, green steel, and we have to be careful that there's no greenwashing here.
What is greenwashing first before we get into green steel?
People like to put the fact environment or green in front of things. Sustainability just for the vibe of it.
Yep.
But is
the
it
vibe? Okay.
Australia?
I love it. Go.
But is it truly a green technology? There is a company out of the Australian National University which uses AI on mining cores to actually fingerprint the iron ore from the Pilbara mines. And so it then grades it based on AI. This batch is better for the South Korean process. This batch is better for the Japanese process. Rather than us blindly sending shiploads of it not being optimal, now we can actually categorize them better locally and then get it to the right market. Government needs to invest. Probably one of my different views there is wherever the government provides this sort of investment and catalytic capital, maybe they need to get some equity so that the taxpayers actually have a bit of ownership.
Welcome back to another episode on the Gold Room podcast. Today I have the chief scientist from the WA government in the studio with me. Sharath, thank you very much for joining me, mate.
Thank you for having me here.
Not a problem. So I see that you've got the quokka pin there. You're a proud Western Australian?
Yes, I am now.
Yeah,
I represent that state and I'm meant to amplify and showcase the excellent work which happens here.
Mate, beautiful. I can't wait to hear more about what you're actually doing to support us. Mate, we always start off with the life and the times. So let's take us back. You look a little bit South Indian to me. Would I be correct?
You are.
Beautiful. Let's go back to the younger years.
Well, I was born in Chennai, which used to be known as Mattress.
Okay.
So for Aussies who follow cricket, it's one of the very proud cricketing states. And the stadium is very popular. So we've had lots of Dean Jones stories happening in Chennai.
Okay.
Growing up, I always had a bit of curiosity. If I see something not working, I had to fix it.
Wow.
Which sort of ended up in me becoming an engineer. And it's one of those dynamics, and we can talk about it later. In India, when you grow up, you're either an engineer or a doctor, or you're a failure.
Okay. Is that a failure to the family?
Failure to the family, failure to society. So it always sets you on a path of being in science, technology, engineering, or mathematics in a STEM profession.
Beautiful.
So that curiosity made me an engineer. And I'll say I was always an outlier. I grew up in an age when everyone did IT. I studied my undergraduate in electronics and communication in a class of 120. I'll say 110 went into IT. My vision was, let me make the computers on which you have to write your code. So I was always focused on the hardware, the materials, the minerals which go into making it.
Awesome.
So that created the pivot for me to come to Australia. I did a master's program in RMIT University in Victoria.
Okay. What year was that?
I came over in 2004.
Oh, wow.
Been here almost 22 years. That program was specifically focused on semiconductor technology. So the electronics which make every phone, iPad, computer, microphone work. And the idea was, how do we actually create homegrown talent in Australia for a technology of the future? Good approach, trained a lot of people, but I think there was a lack of government strategy in how do we actually retain these companies. So the program was supported by Fujitsu, Siemens, Ericsson, who all had a presence. But because there was no government strategy, they all left 3-4 years later.
Wow.
And so that's again a missed opportunity. And I think those things end up shaping how you think of strategy. So I used that as an opportunity to pivot into using electronics for healthcare.
Okay.
So I looked at the Australian context. What do we need long term? People need food, energy, health, water, security, and a good environment. So how do we actually use electronics towards tackling all those things? And so one of the priority areas I chose was healthcare. Using that, I make a lot of medical devices for keeping people out of hospitals, accessing healthcare in remote communities, or in aged care settings. In a residential aged care, how do you prevent people from falling out of bed? You know if they're in bed, any incidents. And so it always comes with the principle of prevention is better than cure.
For sure. For sure. So what's a couple of examples of some of the products that you worked on, which is helping our everyday Australians today?
So just picking back up on that, a healthcare product. The reason it came about is when a person is in a residential aged care setting, they are monitored. There's a door check done every hour to know if they're in bed, if they're sleeping, if they're okay. Already, as an aged person, your sleep quality is poor, and it being interrupted every hour makes it worse, and that leads to a lot of long-term illnesses. And so, the company we were trying to make the solution for wanted to actually help people in aged care setting. They had initially gone around the usual route of people wearing pendants or smartwatches or different sort of measurement units. In many ways, people in an aged care setting are teenagers once again. They don't want to be controlled, they want their freedom. And so we came up with this product, which is essentially a smart mattress cover. So a person lies down on it. It has rubber-based electronics. They won't feel it, but you'll know it's a person. You can see their posture. If they're at the edge of a bed, your software can identify the risk and let a person in the carer station know to go in and intervene.
Wow.
And so if you think of it intuitively, a very simple product, but how it fits seamlessly into their life without a burden on the user, I think was the key.
Wow. They do the same sort of thing for, I guess, babies to prevent cot death. They have technology there that will make sure that they're still breathing and sound an alarm and things like that.
Exactly. And I think a lot of these technologies, as you develop them, the challenge is there, how much they fail. If they start giving false alarms, people lose confidence and they turn them off.
Yeah.
So the rigor in how you produce technology, I think, matters a lot. Given you mentioned cot deaths, sudden infant death syndrome, when we were developing these, we did it in a university lab. You typically don't have space to put a whole bed in it. So we were actually using cot mattresses.
Oh, wow.
And so
Okay.
developed it. So we know the technology works there. But getting it into an aged care setting, which is a much more clinically robust setting, and proving it there then allows you to put it into other use cases.
Yeah, beautiful. That's awesome. Mate, tell me the process from Melbourne to Western Australia.
So I referred to the fact that there were missed opportunities.
Actually, before we go into that,
Yep.
You got a wife and kids?
I do have a wife and kid.
Okay. Do arranged marriage?
No.
You met her in Melbourne or India?
Met her in my undergraduate days.
Okay. So you came over here with a wife
Yep.
and had kids over here?
Yes.
Oh, beautiful. More
So
Australians.
we came over together, did the same program together,
Okay.
and we run a research team of 40 people at RMIT together.
Oh, wow. Far out.
So
Love in the lab.
oh my God, we did a video interview which was titled that.
Was it? Yeah, see, I'm quite quick off the mark with some awesome shit.
I think that was in ABC One, and they actually
Was it?
interviewed 3
Love in the
couples
lab.
who do research together.
Awesome. Oh, that's beautiful, mate. How many kids you got?
One. He's
Okay.
12.
12?
Yep.
Just one?
Yep.
No more? Yeah, okay, one's sometimes enough, eh? I think the same thing. Right, so let's get back to coming over to this great state of ours. What have we got? What were we doing? Did your wife want to go, or was it just you?
Well, given it's 6 months in, we've not managed the full move yet.
Okay.
Because it's we do heavy experimental work.
Yep.
But I'll tell you the journey of how we came about to come here,
Go.
or how the government attracted me here. So I was referring to the fact that there are a lot of missed opportunities in the system. The electronics field, in many ways, is a missed opportunity. So, like the semiconductor strategy, which we were looking to do, now this is 25 years back. If we'd done it, we'd be having some of the most valuable companies in the world in Australia. For example, we talk about AI every day. One of the most valuable companies in the world is NVIDIA, which makes the graphics processing units. That's fully semiconductor technology. And interestingly, we mine all the core materials in Australia and often in Western Australia, which enables these semiconductors. So I saw that missed opportunity from a government strategy point of view.
Could we do that now? Do you think that it's a lost opportunity and it's gone? It's gone to Taiwan and China and everywhere else? Or could we be bringing manufacturing back?
We should be focused on high-value manufacturing being back in Australia.
Yep.
So the way I explain it is we always need to control the secret sauce, the intellectual property which actually makes a product valuable. And then you can get the peripherals from anywhere at scale, put them together. But controlling the secret sauce, I think, is how you have long-term economic resilience. So when seeing that sort of missed opportunity and getting into the research environment, I was seeing a lot of other policy failures. So being the engineer...
Example of?
For example, there were structural challenges for women in STEM professions.
Yes.
So if we want people, our children, to study STEM, get into the profession and stay in it, the whole system needs to support them. If they can't see that vision of being in that system for 30 years, we are failing before they start. Um, so, for example, my wife is a researcher, a professor, we work together. Being in engineering, when she went on maternity leave, she was the first woman to go on maternity leave in the department in 32 years.
Wow.
That highlights the lack of women in that system. So there were no processes in place. So seeing that, we wanted to ensure people who come behind us, there are more systems which support them, which keep them in the system. Similarly, a lot of the funding programs are based around eligibility of when you've completed your last degree. And so if you go away on a maternity leave break, it actually affects your career and affects your competitiveness to win funding and stay in the system.
Surely not now, though, right?
So it was the case, I'll say 15 years back.
Okay.
And then we've had to go and do a lot of changes in policy, advocate for it with the government, for it with the funding agencies. And so that's where, along with my research career, I started doing a lot of this voluntary policy and advocacy work. I really caught the bug because we should appreciate what we have. Australia is a very democratic system. We can access our decision makers, make a logical case to them, provide the evidence, and then you see change. So every time one of those things happened and you saw the change, I think I wanted to do more in keeping the system going and getting better. And so that's sort of where it led me to coming into the chief scientist of Western Australia role.
How were you approached?
So for about 7 years, I was part of one of the national peak bodies called Science and Technology Australia. So it's a voluntary organization. I was on their board leading their policy for 4 years, and then I was a president for a couple of years. Um, During that, I had the opportunity to do a National Press Club address on using science for Australia's future economic opportunity. So I was talking about all these things where we need to value add. If we were investing correctly in innovation, these numbers are now 2 years old. We would be having 42,000 more jobs in the country, and our economy would be $100 billion better off.
Wow.
And so,
What do the policymakers say about that?
not much, and which is what sometimes frustrates. There is a lot of paralysis in decision making, and some of these are obvious things you need to jump into. Question, debate, but pick the ones which are valuable, which align with where we need to be as a country. So I think with the Western Australian government, both the Premier and the Minister for Science and Innovation have been very switched on in what is the future of Western Australia. So if you see, they've even looked at renaming some of the departments with a focus on economic diversification. So they realize mining keeps the place ticking, but how do we use that wealth to diversify our economic sources? How do we be much more innovative? And so when they had that strategy, they put out a call for a new chief scientist. A lot of colleagues pretty much encouraged me to put my hand up. And then I was invited and offered to take on this role.
Awesome. And so that was mid 25. Is that
That's-
right?
Yes. I
June?
started in June 2025.
Yeah. Okay. So what did your first 3 months on the ground look like over here?
Extremely intense. So one of the challenges with most of the state chief scientist roles are they're all part-time.
Okay.
Uh,
I didn't know that.
but then you're trying to pack in everything you want. And I'm ambitious by nature. I wanted to find out everything which is going on. More importantly, what are the hidden gems? Because at least from my experience, whatever we are good at, we take it for granted. And then we actually look at the new aspirational, shiny thing which is far away.
Yep.
So I wanted to uncover all those hidden gems so that we actually invest in them, grow them more. So I'll say my day job or any day in the job is very different. I'm meeting researchers, doing cutting edge innovation. I'm talking to companies or startups trying to take over the world from WA with the challenge of how do we keep them and their intellectual property here. I'm talking to school students or children or teachers about what are the opportunities in STEM. How does AI transform their lives? Is it going to transform? And how do we actually look at the fundamentals? Because new technology will keep coming. And then I'm talking to policymakers, departments to look at pointing out new opportunities. And in many ways, trying to force them to think of the opportunity cost of inaction. we are very good at talking about always return on investment of a particular project. But what happens if we actually don't do that project?
If no one starts something, I think that's what Twiggy Forest is doing a good job of. Maybe this, green hydrogen didn't work by all accounts, but electrifying the Pilbara, while it will have its issues, it does have its issues. Someone's got to start somewhere, and if there's no research, that's exactly what you're saying. If no one's doing any research, then how are we meant to grow? How are we meant to outperform other countries?
And we need to always have a unique selling point. Having resources we export is a unique selling point, but we need to have many more. I think you refer to green hydrogen, right? The ambition to do it very fast sometimes may not work. But now we've seeded so many hydrogen projects in the state. And some of them are pretty successful in terms of coming up with new innovations and intellectual property for hydrogen transport. And so I think it's only a matter of time, but that hydrogen industry will grow.
You think so?
It will.
Wow. Who are you talking to on that front?
So given I visit multiple companies, seeing their developments, I'm seeing some solutions being created very effectively. Given I get an inside view into some of these companies, I can't talk about it freely.
For sure.
But there's one company which licensed an innovation on how do you store hydrogen in nanoparticles. So they take Australian produced nanoparticles, create a slurry with mineral oil, what's used in makeup, and they store hydrogen in it.
Wow.
So it makes it a safe form of storing and transporting. So you have a slurry.
And that's a Western Australian company?
Yep, located here.
Fantastic.
And so, yes, you may argue it's early stage, but they've now built a pilot plant to do low volume storage and production. And that's how you sort of incrementally keep advancing. They will make mistakes, there will be failures.
Of course.
But
That's
we
the
should
only way
be
you learn.
Exactly. And we should be backing that, creating the safety net as a government or a society to help them actually achieve more.
A lot of money's thrown into this clean energy, right? From the government. The government's throwing money at BHP, Rio Tinto, FMG. Do you think some of those companies are using it wisely, or could they be using it better?
I think the government investment is to create that catalysis. And that's my strong view. Government needs to invest. Probably one of my slightly different views there is wherever the government provides this sort of investment in catalytic capital, maybe they need to get some equity. So the taxpayers actually have a bit of ownership.
I bloody like that, mate. That's good, because I read an article, I don't know, however many months ago, about it might have been FMG, and I certainly don't want to write them off because I think they're doing great things. But they mothballed one of their larger projects, and the government had thrown all this cash at them, and they've got enough cash of their own. But the government, so that's our taxpayers' money, right? It's been thrown at them. Look, do what you can. Hopefully, there's a positive outcome. But when they mothball a project like that, and there's $5 billion at stake, which could have maybe been put to other uses, right? Kind of makes me think, what is the government going to get back? Yes, they might get something back in 10, 15, 20 years, but maybe you're right, some equity within that business, or some dividends halfway through, whatever it may be. But they need to have some sort of payback structure.
A payback structure, or actually have a say in strategy. And see, that's where I take a very pragmatic view. You sometimes have to mothball projects because they can be a sunk cost.
For sure.
The technology or that approach may not be ready now. You may need to wait for 10 years. For example, going back to electronics, the first tablet I handled actually was a Dell tablet, 7 years before the Apple iPad.
Wow.
So there was a working tablet with a screen. You could write on it, use software, but it was too early. It didn't have the full package around it for adoption, rollout, and cost. So sometimes with technology, you may need to pause it at some stage. And that's where we need to understand it. People need to explain it better too.
For sure. Communication's key, isn't it? Mate, did you have any mentors that pushed you through in your early years?
I think in life, you rely on a lot of sounding boards. Some of them are your quiet mentors. Some beyond that are your sponsors. Like
Okay.
even when you're not in the room, they're actually backing you and pushing you. So I think there have been quite a few I don't even know about, like nominating for me for this role. There were quite a few nudging me. So I'll say there are quite a few.
Wow, out of the room. So people were putting you forward for the role without telling you about it.
So they were willing to do that, and that will create a lot of noise. But the fact that people were considering that is a good feeling.
Yep.
And I think you build those relationships by also giving back, because mentors see that you're supporting the next generation, you have the right intent. And I think the important thing in taking on these roles is you don't take them on for the title. You take them on for the outcomes you want to achieve.
Beautiful.
You need to have satisfaction in making that change or shifting the dial.
Mate, let's get into mining, right? So you're on the forefront of not just you're not sitting on the sideline. You're right there at the front line of AI technology innovation in mining. So give us a little brief look into that.
I think Australia's mining sector, especially the Western Australian one, has always been ahead of the curve in innovation. The fact that we have one of the most automated mining sectors in the world. And I think we were doing a count a while back, and this was before I even came into the role. But Western Australia had the most self-driven or autonomous vehicles in the world, while people who think it will be the Bay Area with their self-driving taxis. So I think we've always looked at how do we innovate. What has been pushing it has been the bottom line. And so we need to start thinking beyond that.
In what way?
Like, what are the other areas where we can actually use that knowledge and deploy it to make society better? So to me, one of the core things about how an economy is successful is based on intellectual property. So ideas become products, but that idea can be used in multiple areas. So for a mining company, it may be only in mining, but the same technology they used for either automation or for remote monitoring inside mines could be deployed for environmental monitoring, for water quality or air sampling. So how do we actually harness that and deploy in other areas? For me, that's one of the things. But going back to your question on what are the emerging trends, there's you referred to green hydrogen before. Similarly, green steel is one of the biggest priorities.
Mate, don't get me started. You want to talk about green steel?
I'll give you a bit of
Okay,
what
give
I
me a
know.
rundown on green steel, and then I'll give you a little bit of my feedback
So
as an uneducated, non-chief scientist bloke.
and that's good, right? Because we need to have that debate.
Yep.
Now, green steel, and we have to be careful that there's no greenwashing here.
What is greenwashing first before we get into green steel? Go.
People like to put the fact environment or green in front of things. Sustainability just for the vibe of it.
Yep.
But is
The
it
vibe? Okay.
Australia?
I love it. Go.
But is it truly a green technology? So if typical steel is going to take X amount of energy to make, if it's truly green, it should be using half the energy or a significant fraction.
Okay.
Being 5% lesser and labeling it green steel is greenwashing, in my opinion.
Okay, great. So this is your talk. I'm finally sitting in the room talking to the right person. So my question has always been just in, when I've been in a crib room on a mine site, sitting there chatting to people, I've always said, who comes up with what makes it green steel? Who comes up with these? Are there percentages involved? Like I always used to say to people, I'd love to sit down in a room with Twiggy Forrest one day and say, mate, tell me how it's green. Because yes, you might use autonomous trucks. You might be using clean energy for all your vehicles, like getting that ore out of the ground. But then it gets to the port. Let's say it gets from the ground to the port and it's green steel, right? Or it's green ore, but it's on its way to becoming green steel. How long is it on a diesel-powered ship to China before it then goes to a diesel-powered generation for their refineries?
Yep.
Their refineries. And then they put it on a diesel-powered ship and then ship it back to Australia. What percentage is it green steel? I don't want. This isn't politics. This is just facts, right? Like, who comes up with it? Is it 5%? Is it 10% of the fabrication of the steel that people say, oh, well, because and then think about the costs associated with if they did build a refinery here and it was a green refinery. If you're Mike Cannon Brooks from Atlas and you are building this big you're going to build a building, right? Are you going to buy blue scope steel? I don't think they're blue scope steel anymore. But are you going to buy blue scope steel out of China for whatever it is per meter? Or are you going to buy green steel? If you're a shareholder, a stakeholder in a company, do you want them to buy green steel at friggin' 10 times the cost? Now, this is just a layman, not a smart bloke. But these are my questions. Who makes up these figures? Is it the government says, oh, well, if you can do this? Or is it a company that comes and says, hey, listen, we're going to produce this green steel. This is what we're going to do. And then people just jump on board and think, oh, that sounds great. We're going to back that.
So I think that has three parts to it. So one is the full process, right? Like you said, the extraction, transport, processing, deployment into the place you need. That wouldn't be a green process. There you look at the full emission contribution of the full system. Okay. That's why when a company is saying we want to achieve a net zero with it, they have to tackle every bit of it. So there's minimum emission or no emission. But when you talk about green steel or a particular refining process, it's only the process where the ore goes in and comes out, how much energy you're using in that production process to transform iron ore into steel.
So it's green steel once it lands in China, and then once it is, before it leaves the port, once it's FOB.
So wherever the refinery or the production facility is, it's the ore going into the facility and coming out.
Yep.
How much energy does it take? That's what you define as green steel.
Right.
So the current one is steel. If you could do it for about 50-60% of the current energy requirements, you're tending towards green steel.
Okay.
But how do you label a number? I think it has to be much more of an industry standard.
Shouldn't it be from the moment that they fire the explosive, or even before that? Shouldn't it be from when the drill holes are going down?
I think that's one of the challenges, right? You may use the ore in other use cases, not necessarily steel. Yep. And that's why for each use case, you may have to have a different approach.
Okay. All right, that makes sense.
So
still confusing for majority of the population.
And I think that's where a lot of that narrative and debate has to be there. People have to ask the harsh questions and you need to explain it. If it's not perfect, how do you actually improve that explanation?
Just be honest. Just be like,
and I think for me, that's the
3% of 3%, but it's still a reduction. Look, at the end of the day, if that's what people are screaming for, a reduction, then that's great, right? Because if it's 3% now, it's 5% in 2 years' time. Maybe it's 10% as technology improves and increases in the future. As we said right at the very start, you've got to start somewhere.
Yep. And it's sustainable fuels as an example, right? Initially, it started as a 2%, 3% mix. Now they're able to do 10%, 20%. And there are some aviation fuels which are fully biologic products now.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing.
But it's a 10, 15-year journey. But going back to your question on innovations in mining, green steel. Now, to make green steel happen, each refinery has different processes. Like the process used in China is different from the process used in Japan, the process used in Korea, the process being tried in Australia. So that means the ore going into the refinery needs to be a different grade for each of them to actually get that proper reduction. But if you put a blended ore, you're not going to get the reduction in energy use. It's not really green steel anymore.
Okay.
And so there is a company out of the Australian National University which uses AI on mining cores to actually fingerprint the iron ore from the Pilbara mines. And so it then grades it based on AI, saying this batch is better for the South Korean process, this batch is better for the Japanese process. Rather than us blindly sending shiploads of it not being optimal, now we can actually categorize them better locally and then get it to the right market.
Australia's brilliant at discovery, but lacks a little bit in innovation, as we spoke about. What can we be doing differently?
I think the first thing we need is a cultural shift of what we appreciate. So We need to accept failure as normal. When we're doing innovation, there's a lot of risk involved. Australia actually has one of the highest levels of trust in the scientific community. But if they are starting to take risk making products, they somehow start getting isolated again from the trust system.
Yep.
So I think that's the cultural change. But picking on the fact of what you said, Australia is outstanding in discoveries, it's actually true. Per capita, we produce more publications and patents than most places in the world. Our challenge has always been how do we actually convert that innovation into or that invention into an innovation and a product? And that usually requires a lot of money. So for people who are not familiar with, say, how grants and research works, typically a research project is about 300,000 to 500,000 over 3 years. So in the commercial space, that's actually not a lot of money.
Absolutely not. That's like somebody's wages.
Pretty much. So you're getting one person dedicated on solving a scientific problem, and you then generate that outcome. Some of these would be worth as an intellectual property. So what you can protect as a patent and convert into a product. So once you have this patent, getting it into a product is the tough journey. In Australia, for a long time, there was actually no way of doing it. There was no local funding. So you always had to tap on international doors. Then they take the idea, it becomes their product, which we then buy back for 10 times the price. So in some of the policy work I was contributing to a few years back, we actually set up what's called the University Research Commercialization Scheme. So it funds taking ideas out of universities, that intellectual property, creating a spin-off of or an early stage company in Australia.
Okay.
And so that 300 to 500,000 over 3 years, when you get to that next stage, you probably need about 500,000 to 5 million over 2 years. And so these programs give that support. They de-risk, look at business plans. And so you're creating local growth, local intellectual property. So the reason I explain that is the culture shift we need is taking pride in intellectual property. We easily lose a lot of intellectual property we generate from the country. The more we hold, the more they grow in value locally. We keep companies locally. So in Western Australia, those are things I'm trying to do. Raise that commercialization understanding of our discoveries. How do we keep it here? I'm talking to a lot of venture capitalists, high net worth individuals about actually investing in the intellectual property. It's easy to invest in what you know, mines, shares. But if you invest in intellectual property, yes, there's a risk, but the upsides, your money can become 20 times, 40 times. But there's that pride element. We are helping our local intellectual property stay local, grow much more, and contribute to our community.
That's amazing. The next 10 to 15 years, right? So before we started recording, you were saying that the last chief scientist of WA was like 61 to 70 something, 75, was it?
Yeah, approximately.
Yep.
He served for 11 years.
Yep.
And he had a long history of setting up new research institutions in WA. And so he was able to actually get into this role and, I'll say, shape what comes next.
Okay. So you're 43, 42.
43.
You look 35, mate. You got bloody good genes. You've got so if you were to work to 60, you know, you're which you definitely good, 67 even. What do you see in the next 10 to 15 years on the horizon in innovation and protection of intellectual, or just developing intellectual property, then obviously protection of intellectual property?
I think there's a lot of understanding in how to become more savvy about it. And at least my role in WA and in Australia, I want that understanding to become universal. The reason why people look at the US is that the intellectual property system is so mature. So every university produces 10, 20 spin-outs every year. And those are the products we end up buying. And we have to, if we really take a step back and look, every new product or company we look at has been created by people fresh out of university. That's because they're not constrained by the regular thinking. They are disruptive.
Awesome.
So unless we're actually investing in that early stage, we are not going to actually have that disruption and that massive growth and opportunity.
So are we talking about investing in the early stage, like young students at school?
At school, out of school, the thing is, we shouldn't have any preconceived notion about what is investable. Focus on the idea and the person driving that idea with passion.
Okay, wow, that's impressive. What about What do you think we'll see in the mining space in the next 10 to 15 years? What changes from your experience out there in the field, talking to these businesses, talking to the governing bodies?
I think in Australia and Western Australia, we'll probably see a bit more processing of critical minerals locally. There's a lot of federal strategy, there's support coming in through some of the US partnerships. And I think that'll be better for us in the long term
The critical minerals.
because every technology which is on the forefront relies on critical minerals, whether it's AI, computing, quantum computing,
Weapons.
whether it's weapons and munitions, whether it's new healthcare technology. This is the Gold Room podcast. Most of the new cancer diagnostics and treatment are based on gold nanoparticles.
Wow.
So, how much of it do we actually locally process and convert into the therapeutic rather than it being done elsewhere? So, I think those are, I'll say, the big questions. How do we harness those minerals into different use cases?
It's just more bringing manufacturing back here, bringing refinery back here.
And we can focus on the smart manufacturing or the critical intellectual property piece of it. For example, in my career, I make a lot of medical devices. Often in the medical devices, that sensing component, like what detects if you're going to have a heart attack, is where the secret sauce lies. It doesn't lie in the packaging, in the electronics. So my vision is I will do the secret sauce here so that I don't lose that intellectual property.
Awesome.
But I'll source the packaging from wherever it is cheapest. Because you have to be pragmatic, otherwise you can't be competitive in the market.
For sure. Mate, finally, for young people considering a university degree in engineering or science, what opportunities lay before them in the future?
I think there's a lot. There is a need to change our education system to
In
prepare
what
them
way?
better. I think
'Cause I love this question.
I think in multiple ways. I'll tackle it because to me, early education is different from secondary to higher education and university, and each of them have different challenges. I think in early education, it needs to be much more curiosity driven. One of the biggest challenges in our education system is the stress on teachers. They often don't have resources in any specialist field, which indirectly means they don't have confidence into getting into an inquiry based thing. A child can ask ChatGPT a lot of these science questions if they're curious about something and get more than they could from their teacher, unfortunately. So, how do we actually scaffold that early education piece? Because that's where all the biases get built about what's possible and what's not. For example, by the time girls get into secondary school, they've been influenced that they're not good at mathematics. But if you actually go look in history, most of the brilliant mathematicians have been women. So, there's nothing about whether you're male or female which determines how you're good at it. The second bit is the secondary education. Like once they have passion, they shouldn't lose it. And most people you talk to who are in a science, technology, engineering, mathematics profession, they end up there because some teacher inspired them. And so if the teachers are not passionate about that field, not because they don't like the job they do, but because they've not had the tools, the time, the resources to do it. For example, in Australia, especially in secondary education, 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 3 teachers teaching mathematics are out of the field, which means they've not had any formal mathematics training. And so, if you're not confident in your ability to teach it, you're going to teach the basics. You're going to probably shy away from the tough questions. And so, that weakens the whole pipeline.
Do you think that maybe the primary schools need to not go back because I've never done it, but at primary school, the young kids just have one teacher and that teacher is expected to know a very basic reach on all of these subjects. What are your thoughts on a primary school going to more of a secondary school type of format where each teacher is specialized to some degree? What do you think?
And I think that's necessary. And that's why I was saying I don't want to blame teachers because they're not resourced well enough to actually deliver this.
For sure.
In primary school, if a person's doing music or art, they go to a specialist teacher. But why don't they do that if it's mathematics or science?
That's what I'm thinking, yeah.
But the other way to look at it is do much more project-based learning. Set up a project, bring in specialist support. And one of the challenges when I said the education system has to change is there are a lot of passionate specialists in the ecosystem who want to go contribute.
Yep.
They're willing to go spend a few hours a week engaging with children, exciting them.
Yep. Do you know, have you heard of Core Learning Foundation?
I do. They do an outstanding job.
Christian and Susie do and the whole team.
Yep.
You know, Jacoby, everyone's doing such a great job of getting STEM research and study into that early stage education. Fantastic.
See, and they're doing a very good job in secondary, right? I think their program is year 8 curriculum aligned. So that was one of the.
I've seen lots of pictures, and they are into primary schools. They're all throughout regional Australia, regional Western Australia.
And it's excellent because one of the challenges, and that's how Susie nailed it, because if you want to bring in such education, it has to align to the curriculum. Otherwise, there's no time to fit it into a daily routine.
Yep.
And so I think she really got it right by doing that. Similarly, there's a program out of University of Western Australia called Einstein First.
Okay.
So they have done curriculum aligned Einstein physics from year 3 to year 8. And so it's a WA program used in a lot of schools here. So I think that's probably the opportunity, creating enough tools for teachers to get into the system. So the burden's not on them, but the community as a whole supports them.
That's amazing, mate. Well, look, this has been a very educational, no pun intended, episode for me. So, look, I thank you very much for your time, and I know you're busy. But I've loved this episode. You're a proud Western Australian, and so am I, mate. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Not a problem. Thank you very much for tuning into another episode on the Gold Room podcast. I hope you've learned something. I hope that if you've got some young kids out there that you want to do very well in school, make sure you reach out to your own primary school or secondary school and say, what can we be doing more to teach our young kids that they need to support this country and they need to have a great education. So thanks very much for tuning in. Cheers.